Hey everyone, welcome to another artwork analysis. Now, it wouldn't be complete if I don't talk about an artist that a lot of people really look up to when it comes to animation work or comic work, and that's Jung. Now, I remember watching him sort of rise as people finally started knowing who he was and how impressive his style is. For those who don't know, Jung on maybe first glance, you can look at his work and be like, this is pretty impressive. I think this guy is pretty cool and such. But what's even more impressive is his ability to draw all of these without reference and to do it freehand. The freehand part is probably the most impressive. If you've ever seen him draw live, you realize he just goes in for it. He doesn't care about drawing a intricate sketch or anything, he just does it. And that is part of why he is so darn good. So, how do you get there? Now, I'm not going to even pretend I'm close to Jung-gi's craftsmanship, of course, but I want to talk about it from a very basic, very fundamental perspective, and perhaps what he is thinking of or subconsciously have in his mind when he is drawing freehand. So, first of all, I'm going to be talking about structure, and then I'm going to be talking about volume, and then, as a final note, not really part of it, but sort of pretty impressive too, that I find in this work, clothing folds. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about structure. Now, I'm sure a lot of artists, especially if you're going into animation, you probably have heard this term, and a lot of people don't really understand the difference between structure and volume. And in that case, when you're being marked maybe for an entry portfolio for an art school, you don't really know why you might have gotten A in one section and maybe a D in another section. Not to say that's going to happen, but just saying. So what is structure? Structure is basically if your character or your object makes sense from a mechanical standpoint. So what I mean by that is, are your bones on on the character's body looking like they're attached? Are their muscles looking like they're attached? So basically, if you are creating, let's say, a Lego piece, are the Legos fit together, or are they looking like they're disjointed? So, disjointed. Whoa. Can't even pronounce that right. Anyways, so that's really structure. Structure is just a matter of you're building like a character out of building blocks. And are those building blocks making sense? Or, for example, the limbs. Let me start drawing on top of this. Are your limbs attached to the torso? This sort of thing. I'm sure there's a very basic diagram of it, but this is something that you'll probably be taught from a very basic standpoint. Are simply your limbs attached to the torso? Are they fit into space properly? That's part of it too, by the way. Structure is basically encompassing your space with objects and parts and making sure that they function properly together. Of course, I don't want to say that that's a universal definition, but that's what I've been taught, and I'm sure there's other additions and subtractions that people might have with that definition. But anyways, that's really the point. Structure doesn't make sense, and when Jung-gi draws his figures, one thing I notice when he does it is that every part connects to another part. he's so conditioned, he's so trained that he is able to keep going, knowing that his structure is going to work, because it's sort of like his strokes flow to the next few strokes, and when you put them together, it's sort of like his signature way of creating structure. So what do I mean by this? So you notice he might be drawing the trapezius here, and it's like, oh, I'm going to draw the deltoid as well. Oh, here's the sum of the folds. Here we go. So I would imagine he would be drawing strokes something like this. Everything is very well connected. If we were to analyze this from a nude anatomy standpoint, you'll notice that, hey, his spine is here, he has muscles here. Oh my gosh, my anatomy is a bit off here, but don't worry, I haven't been training anywhere. Anyways, so the deltoid is here, and then you have the biceps, and you have clothing to... You got the triceps here, you got the elbow here, and then you got clothing to kind of emulate the fact... Well, not emulate, to show the fact that the muscles inside are intact. If you are as trained as he is, you will be able to draw these muscles you're interconnecting these strokes, and it's sort of becoming natural. When you are starting out as an artist, you're most likely going to be like, okay, here's the rib cage. I need to attach like a sphere here for the deltoid area. I need to attach a sphere here for the elbow area, and then maybe one for the wrist, and then there's the hand there. The reason why you are taught this sort of thing is because it forces the training artist to really think of it as if everything has to connect to each other. So the fact that you're attaching a sphere around this area, there's the attachment, by the way, means that no matter how you draw it, you're going to keep your structure. Now, again, I'm not saying Kim Jung-gi ever does this, but he probably does it in his mind. He thinks of these attachments as he goes along. But he doesn't really need to draw it, because everything, again, is sort of like a dance to him. Everything connects, everything works, and he has his own signature way of creating the structure to ensure that nothing is disjointed. So you might have artists starting out who might just break structure. Let's say they do this sort of thing. That's when you realize, hey, perhaps this is not this is not how the human body works. That's not how the arm connects to the rib cage. But whatever. That's really on you to really understand how a human structure works. Now, of course, I also mentioned that structure has to matter when you are creating your environment. So even stuff like this, where your sphere here has to attach on the plane of the table here. It has to basically make sense. I'm not Kim Jung-gi. I can't do it freehand like that, but you notice that everything is placed in space in a manner that is logical. Unless you are doing abstract art, you really want to understand that gravity exists, and we have to be able to emulate that on a canvas. So understand that if you think about it, really just sit down and think about it, you realize everything has to connect. That's how it goes. Even if you're sitting on your chair right now, your butt has to connect to your chair. That's one of the biggest lessons you have when you start out as an artist, to know that if you are doing any sort of realism, they have to connect. Everything works together. Nothing works independently, and that's really structure. So let's move on to volume. I hope that made sense. So volume is a little bit different. So let's say you already understand that, hey, this is the head, there's the rib cage, you got the arms here, that's the structure, right? So if you look at this is a little bit rough, right? It's not really working very well because these are rough shapes, they lack any type of volume. So really, what is volume? Volume is basically creating that sense of three-dimensionality. So what I mean by that is circles and spheres are naturally very ambiguous. We don't know where this sphere is facing. Well, more like an oval shape, but we don't know where it's facing. We don't know what's going on here. But Kim Jung-gi is insanely well with this, and I want you to really take note of this. Look how he draws the head. Well, I messed up a little bit here, but notice how the head is aligning with a rectangular prism. Now, if anybody's been listening or following me, I always advocate to use rectangular prisms and cubes because they always face a certain way. There is no qualms about it. You know where these planes are facing. It's not like the sphere here. So when you do this, you are creating three-dimensional space. There is, again, no way for the viewer to make a mistake of where this man is facing. You see this everywhere with Kim Jung-gi's work. He does this so subconsciously, he can do it in his sleep. So notice how this guy's head is facing down. Look at this. So you feel there are cubes everywhere. Even the rib cage here on this woman. It's perfect. It's perfect for his style because he's trying to create these elaborate three-dimensional spaces freehand. So what better way than to make use of rectangular prisms? So of course, if we don't even look at the characters tend to be rounder. You have to round off these rectangular prisms, obviously. You don't want to just draw squares all the time. But stuff like the table here. I mean, he's doing fisheye perspective, which is the next level. But he's still creating three-dimensional space with rectangular prisms. Everything in this picture is made of prisms. Now, you can break down the human body as much as you like, but ultimately, I feel like, this is my personal opinion, and I feel like it's the most helpful too. If you see it as rectangular prisms, then there is nothing that can go wrong. Because a lot of people they kind of sloppily create these circles that really don't mean much. If you are able to understand rectangular prisms, then you can start rounding off your rib cages, for instance. It's like, oh, my rib cage, even though it's round, it's facing this way. Therefore, I can start adding structure to it. So stuff like this. And then you can add the hips as well here. Like that. So as you can see, everything kind of makes sense. I want you to really study this picture and other of Kim Jung-gi's work and realize that all his work aligns with rectangular prisms. He just does it so naturally. Even the most rounded shapes here. You see the patterns here? You can even see there is a little bit of rectangular prisms going on. The only things maybe you could see are perhaps the ellipses, like the rounded cups and such. But, of course, you don't want to have a whole picture of rounded cups. And you realize that perfect roundness is something that is more artificial. Nature tends to work off of some stuff that can show perspective. which of course rectangular prisms do. On a final note, I want to talk about clothing folds. One of the most impressive things that he does is his ability to create clothing folds. Now, this is a topic I'll probably have to use in another video, but I'm going to really create a very basic idea of it. Wherever there's tension in clothing, you start to create folds. So you notice that even though it's not picture perfect, we're not talking about picture perfect with reference type of thing. He knows where the tensions lie. So you realize this arm is bending this way, therefore it creates tension right here. So where there's tension, you just create some wrinkles here. Of course, you have to go into the intricate thickness of the material. So this looks like more of a leather coat sort of thing. So the folds are a little bit bigger type of thing, right? So even here, you notice that because his torso and hips are crunching, you create a bit of folds here. This is something that for sure you would have to study photos, you have to study reality to really understand. But once you really understand it, it doesn't really matter if you get exactly the folds right. You just have to know that folds should exist at certain points. And then you could just sort of like tweak the fold so that it fits your composition properly. Nobody's asking you to have perfect folding, especially when it doesn't work with your composition. So one instance here that I noticed is this girl's skirt at the back. Look how simplified this shape is. Yes, in reality, there are probably folds going like this because of the tension of this leg here coming out. But Kim Jung-gi knows that there is no freaking point in putting folds here. There's no need for the complexity. So again, use the folds as tools for your composition and not the other way around. You do not want to just technically make all the folds on your piece appear. You want to do it cleverly. So notice how simplified the folding here is. He doesn't need to draw those folds properly. Well, not properly. I mean, he doesn't need to draw them in a complex manner. All he needs to do is hint at it. And once he hints at the movement of the folds, there is no need for anything else. Again, because she is in the background, the composition wouldn't work if she is drawn too complexly. Anyways, thank you for listening. Hopefully that was helpful. There are a lot of things to talk about with Kim Jung-gi, but hopefully this is a good start on what you could learn by looking at his work. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.